Hello, and welcome back to another super exciting episode. Today we're going to be looking at some pins that came from a very obscure promotional event from Nintendo's early days. If you know anything about Nintendo game collecting, you've probably heard about something called Nintendo World Championships 1990. This US-wide competition, which culminated at Universal Studios, has become legendary amongst fans, so much so that even the smallest physical relic from it can sell for hundreds of dollars. But did you know that the Nintendo World Championships wasn't the first nationwide tournament held by Nintendo? Taking place exclusively in Canada, an event called the Nintendo Challenge Tour actually predates the Nintendo World Championships by 1 year. The weird thing about these events is how little information there is on them. I can't find a single photo from any of the tour stops, although the final championship event did supposedly air on Much Music, which is Canada's equivalent to MTV. I'm sure this footage does exist somewhere, and I'm really curious to see what these events looked like. What little information we do have comes from the pages of Nintendo Power Flash, which was basically a Canadian version of the Nintendo Fun Club News. On the last page of issue 4 in spring 1989, we get to see a mock-up of the outside of the truck that was used, showing Mario bursting through a TV set. And a little over a year later, in issue 9, we get to see the second iteration, and this time a real photo of the truck used in Challenge Tour 1990. This updated truck used a new yellow and black color scheme and replaced the sponsor logos of the previous year with logo advertising the newly released Game Boy. A few artifacts from the event have also surfaced. This includes a finalist plaque and a t-shirt from the 1990 event, as well as a set of wearable buttons, which is what I have here to show you today. But besides that, it seems all we have to remember these events is the stories from the people who experienced them. And one of those stories I'm actually going to share with you at the end of this video, because one of those people was in fact myself. But for now, let's take a look up close at these interesting collectibles. So here we have the Challenge 1990 pin in all its glory. So I'm gonna look up close on it. As we can see, we have the iconic Mario from Mario 3, of course, as you can tell by the raccoon tail. Challenge 1990, trademarked of course, so you can tell they're covering all their bases. Some cool lightning bolts and other patterns which are very indicative of the year this took place. One thing you'll notice is the kind of changed color scheme versus what it should be. His arms should be red and his suspenders should be blue, but obviously they were limited by the choices of color they had. So it's a pretty nice little pin. One thing you'll notice, it is a cool square looking design, and it's a standard pin back button here, which is cool. So if we turn it around, see a copyright information, which is cool. So we have made in Canada by HAS Novelties Limited, Toronto. One cool thing about HAS Novelties is they are actually founded in 1969, and they are Canada's first manufacturer of pin buttons. So there's a lot of history behind them. And they're still around to this very day, although they've expanded into doing more things than just pins. A cool thing about this is, if you see how it's made, so the outside shell here is made of metal, and then it is folded around what appears just to be a piece of black cardboard, and you'll see there are two different divots here, and so those can be poked out depending on how the customer wants to orient their pin. If they want it to be a diamond shaped pin like that, then they can pop out the pins like that, and then if they want it to be a regular square pin, then they can pop them out sideways. In terms of how this was obtained, from what I understand, the only way to actually obtain this was to participate in the challenge event itself. You didn't just get one just for showing up. You actually had to sign up and participate in the challenge. I think everybody who was in the challenge did get one of these, but I'm not 100% sure. It might have only been the people who won out of a particular group of people, but I'm thinking it was everybody who actually participated got one as kind of a consolation prize. A cool story about this pin in particular, which I purchased online, is it turns out I actually purchased it from one of the finalists of the 1990 event. I only found this out after I bought it, when the seller actually contacted me and mentioned it in the shipping email. So that was a really cool surprise, as there were only 9 finalists in the 1990 series. So there we have Challenge 1990 pin in all its glory. So if you thought that pin is cool, I've got something else that's really cool to show you. Unfortunately, it's not as in good condition, but due to its rarity, I don't even mind. And that is the even rarer Défi 1990 pin. No, this isn't from a different event. Défi 1990 is the alternate name that was used for Challenge 1990 during the few days that it took place in French Canada. This pin is incredibly rare because it was only available for a small portion of the event, only for about 12 days of the full 70-day tour. It's identical pretty much in every way except for the different name, although there is a slight difference in actually where it's laid out, which is cool. It even has completely unique lightning bolt that isn't on the other one, and then a different arrangement of text and such. Is it trademarked? Oh, yes it is. Looks like they trademarked that as well. Or, sorry, MC. I think that is the French equivalent to trademark. All right, the final pin we're going to be looking at today is the most interesting pin of the bunch, if you ask me, as this pin predates both Challenge 1990 and the Nintendo World Championships. In fact, it comes from what is quite possibly Nintendo's first ever attempt at a video game championship. I'm speaking of none other than Nintendo Challenge Tour 89. Let's take a look up close at this one. So you'll see, first off, it uses the Mario from Mario 2, as I do not believe Mario 3 was available at this time. So this was still the hottest game that you could play. If you look at the back, it's just a standard metallic pin button. If we look at it looks to be made in Canada by HAS Novelties. So yes, looks like they went for the same manufacturer of both years, which makes sense considering their heritage and their obvious skill at making the best pins in Canada. I wish I had more information about this event, but I don't. We know what the truck looked like on the outside. We know a schedule of where it happened, and we know they handed out these pins. Unlike Challenge 1990, however, there are no t-shirts or other artifacts linked to the event that we know of. I really want to see what the final championships for Challenge 89 looked like. Was it a cool event? Was it so cool that it gave Nintendo the confidence to launch the World Championships a year later? Hopefully we'll have those answers one day, but for now we do have these pins, which are relics that let us know with absolute certainty that these events did in fact happen. So when I started writing this video, I had totally forgotten this, but I actually attended Challenge 1990 myself at a fair in my hometown, and this pin was actually a central element of that memory. I had no idea what I was witnessing because I was only a few years old at the time, but I still remember certain details very vividly, so for the sake of historical preservation, I'll share everything I can remember. And if you make it through to the end of the story, I'm going to share with you an exclusive bit of news about the Challenge Tour that I don't think has ever been revealed. I remember being at the fair when I was very young. I usually did everything with my brother at the time, but I think he wanted to go on a ride that I wasn't tall enough for yet, so we had split up and it was just my mom's friend looking after me. I remember seeing the trailer truck from a distance. I didn't speak much at the time, but I remember just staring at it. Then my mom's friend, seeing how interested I was, said something like, "Look, Nintendo, do you want to go play?" I remember being so excited by that offer because for some reason I assumed that she was just going to say no. So I approached the trailer. What I remember seeing is a row of TVs lined across a long stage, facing outwards with a canopy overhead. The side of the trailer truck formed the backdrop for the stage. There was a lot of commotion going on at these consoles. I remember being really intimidated because there were all these tall kids around getting really heated and worked up playing these games. I didn't really understand it was a competition. I instead just thought that you had to be that intense and skilled in order to play a video game. That's when I saw one or two TVs on the leftmost side that looked different than the others. There was nobody using them, and they were encased in this appealing shell that made them look very kid-friendly. So I assumed, oh, those must be the ones intended for little kids like me to use. What I'm pretty sure they were actually is these Game Boy kiosks right here. You can kind of imagine how a young kid would gravitate to them. So I remember playing the Game Boy kiosk, and looking back, I'm 100% certain the game being demoed was Tetris. I know this because I was utterly disappointed. Compared to the exciting NES action games taking place on the other screens, this one was just a series of monochrome bricks. I remember being so jealous of the kids who got to play the NES consoles, as those ones actually looked fun to play. That's when I saw this pin for the very first time. There was an announcer who was standing behind the TVs, giving them out to kids who participated in the tournament. And I remember him talking up the pins, making them seem really desirable, trying to get people to participate in the tournament to win one. I remember just staring at the pin for what must have been minutes as he held it, completely mesmerized. I had never seen a square pin button before, so the shape was really intriguing. But what was most interesting to me was the image on the button. Because the announcer was standing so far away, I couldn't really get a good view of it, so I kept staring at it, trying to make out what the image was. I clearly remember seeing the lightning bolts, and I remember thinking this button was some kind of magical token that would give me powers. I wanted one so bad. So that's when I gathered up the courage to try to go up and play one of the NES consoles. I waited for an opening when the console was left unattended, then I jumped in and picked up the controller. Unfortunately, what I didn't realize at the time is there was actually a long queue you had to put your name on in order to participate, so almost immediately I was kicked off by another kid. It was at that moment that my hopes of getting one of these magical pins was shattered. That's my story of experiencing the Challenge Tour 1990. But that's not everything I have to share with you today. While researching this video, trying to find glimpses of what the Challenge Tour looked like, I stumbled across a promotional video from Nintendo Campus Challenge 1991. And that's when I noticed they were using the exact same TVs I remember from Challenge 1990. Not only that, the scoreboard is the same, and the registration booth looks exactly like I remember. So I'm almost certain the Nintendo Campus Challenge was simply a reskinning of the Canadian Challenge Tour from the previous year. All they had to do was repaint the truck, make some new t-shirts, and boom, they have a brand new event. There's one key difference I noticed with the Campus Challenge event, and that has to do with where the players stood when they played. If you look at the TVs, you'll notice there are two displays on opposite sides of the booth. At Challenge 1990, I remember the contestants were playing on the lower TVs, and the announcer was standing up on the stage behind the TVs, where he used the screens facing him to verify people's scores. Anyway, I think the reason they changed this in Campus Challenge 1991 was to prevent other players from seeing the games being played and gaining an unfair advantage. Unlike Challenge 1990, in Campus Challenge 91, you were competing for cash and an actual car as a prize, so there was a very real chance of people trying to cheat. One piece of evidence that suggests this is in all the videos of Campus Challenge, except for the grand finale, the lower TVs are always turned off. For the finale, I think they were able to turn the TVs back on because obviously none of the spectators had a chance to compete anymore. So that's just my theory, but I think it explains a lot of things. Anyway, that's all for today. So thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you again in the next video. Yo.